I don't do any editing other than the beginning and the end. I like the spontaneity that goes along with not having any pre-calls. And I generally will introduce my guest and say, you can look him up on LinkedIn. I don't spend a lot of time talking about you. I kind of like to dive right in, and I'll usually push it back to my guest and say something like, you know, I certainly didn't give you justice for all the things you've done, John. Why don't you push it from the dock however you'd like? And then I just really like to just have a spontaneous discussion about whatever it is you want to talk about. And I know you have a book, and so I'm happy to, push it off that way. What's the title?
Quest, Risk, Adventure, and the Search for Meaning.
Okay.
And how long do we have?
Well, I schedule an hour.
Okay.
It's a risk, adventure, and the search for meaning.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Okay.
You'll find
questions for me?
I'm very flexible. I can bob and weave with the best of them. And so
Awesome.
let's just make this a conversation. And you throw everything at me and I'll bob and weave.
It is just about having a conversation. That's really all it is. Everybody's got something to say, and it's a matter of just having a chance to talk about it. Of course, the podcast is Talking Innovation. Previously, it was known as Talking Cloud. I changed it because I wanted to broaden it out and really make it so that we can talk about anything. That's kind of the goal and objective. So that being said, I'm ready to go. So I'm going to give it a countdown. You ready?
You're ready.
John Graham, I'm going to introduce you as the author of Quest, Risk, Adventure, and the Search for Meaning, and a whole bunch of other things that we're going to learn about that way. So here we go. 5, 4. Hey, welcome. And thank you so very much for joining me on another episode of Talking Innovation. And I mean, this is where the conversation goes anywhere and everywhere, because that's where innovation is found. It's everywhere. And I love the fact that, I get some amazing, brilliant, amazing guests. I mean, that's all I can say. I've recorded multiple episodes here recently because I opened it up on LinkedIn and said, hey, come on, man, I need guests. And I've had some wonderful responses, and this is also one of them. Now, I could tell you a long list of the amazing accomplishments of my guest, John Graham, but I'll point out first and foremost his book, Quest. It's Risk, Adventure, and the Search for Meaning. That is a very intriguing title to me in and of itself. And so that's the thread I want to pull on first. I'm excited to introduce John Graham to be on the program. John, it's great to have you.
It's great to be here, Grant. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, so quest, risk, adventure, I get all that stuff being kind of parochial on the words. Search for meaning starts to, that gets deep. What meaning? Life? Where's that book going?
It's a search for meaning in my own life, but it's an everyman book. I think that one of the things I've learned in 84 years now is that every single one of us, and this probably goes back thousands and thousands of years, has one key objective, and that's to find the true meaning, a true purpose for our lives, something that lights us up, something that makes us passionate, something that drives us. Many people don't find it, but the search for meaning is absolutely essential. I found early on that I went down some wrong paths to find it. I found for the whole first half of my life that the meaning in my life would come from physical adventure. And the more dangerous and sometimes violent, the better. So, you
Hmm.
know, I'm looking at you now and I'm saying I'm lucky to be alive. I've come close to a violent death a dozen times, if not 15 or 20.
Hmm.
Wars, revolutions, mountain climbs, whatever, and I just really enjoyed it. And I was an adrenaline junkie, and that was the meaning for my life. And then all of a sudden, it wasn't. Turned out the turning point happened to be a battle in Vietnam, but it could have been something else. And I realized that I couldn't live a life that shallow. I hadn't found the meaning of my life, and so I set
Hmm.
about to search for it. And that's why that second half of the subtitle of the book. My
Yeah,
life started.
it's very. I mean, it's when you read, quest, risk, adventure, and you see a mountaintop, uh, that puts your mind kind of in a context and frame, and then when you come in with and the search for meaning, it really, for me anyway, it's I don't know how to explain how it just kind of crashes in on that image that I have, and kind of presents me with, regardless of the quest and adventure, what really matters is the meaning. And I'm not doing a good job articulating what I'm trying to say, but I find that very, very intriguing title.
Well, if you find it that intriguing, Granby, go out and buy the book.
I will. I will.
It's also an audio book. But you know, it's interesting. I said about writing that. It took me a long time to write it. The first part was easy because I remembered my adventures, and they're terrific stories. I'll probably end up telling a few of them on this podcast today. But the hardest part, and the book takes a deep dive, and I mean dive. It gets down to the very bottom of my life
Hmm.
when I really thought I had no meaning in my life after that battle in Vietnam, and then I climbed up the other side. And for the last 45 years or so, I think I've been pretty much been an engine for doing good in the planet. We can talk more about that in my work with the Giraffe Heroes Project, which is about moving people to stick their necks out. That is to say, to take risks to solve public problems. And I teach civic engagement and other ways of encouraging people to stick their necks out, but without getting their
Hmm.
heads cut off. So
Right.
yeah, I
Right.
mean,
Right.
the search for meaning is absolutely key. And I'm convinced now that in my life, I know where I finally found it. I found it in service. I found it in giving back. And I think that's true for a whole lot of people, that
Hmm.
ultimately you find that meaning in your life through some kind of giving back. Sure, for a while it may be money and power, or God knows else what people think gives their life meaning. You just go on social media, you'll find dozens of people trying to find meaning in all kinds of squirrely ways. But ultimately, at 84, I'm convinced, especially working with the Giraffe Heroes Project, where I have the opportunity every day to talk to people who are doing good with their lives, that the true meaning of life comes from some kind of giving back, from solving tough public problems, whether it's
Hmm.
a tough public problem in your community, homelessness, housing, for example, public transportation, environmental screw ups, to global things like climate change or the war in Iran, and anything in between.
Right. It's kind of
As you can
what
see,
you.
as you can
It's
see, Grant, I can prattle on
it.
forever. You got to interrupt me and ask me some questions.
No, that's fine. I think, in Stephen Covey's book, uh, Seven Habits, he talks about circle of influence, right?
Yep, yep,
Sphere
yep.
of influence, and I think that's what you're talking about, right? In the context of giving back, it's whatever you want to bite off. What do you recommend? I guess, say someone's thinking to themselves, "Wow, I'd like to give back." Where do they start? What do you recommend? Do you have any particular thing, or do you think they look inside and go, "What's important to them? What problems do they feel passionate about?" How do you feel they get
So
started?
it's all of those things. It's all of those things. But the biggest thing, I suppose, for most people is to start small. And as my dear wife, Ann Medlock, who started the Giraffe Heroes Project, often says, if you're going to start being an activist, if you're going to start trying to change things for the better, pull up the corner of the rug you can pull up. And what she means by that, of course, is just look around, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Right.
maybe some maybe some yahoos are trying to ban books in your kid's middle school. Well, don't just sit there and complain. Go to a school board meeting and raise your hand and say, "No, I don't want to do that," and explain why, and endure the brickbats or whatever, but follow through.
Right.
Or maybe there's a company that is mindlessly polluting a lake in your town, and no one's stopping him. We'll go down to the city council or file a lawsuit or whatever, but do something where you can reach.
Right.
Sitting back in your chair and saying, "Oh, the war in Iran is stupid and wrong," or climate change or artificial intelligence, it's just awful, awful, awful. But I can't do anything about it. And you're probably right. I don't think any one of us is going to solve the problem of climate change or artificial intelligence in our living rooms. Those are
Mm.
huge problems where we can make a contribution, but it's also an excuse to do nothing,
Yeah.
because the problems are so immense. So
So let me.
I urge us to start where you can reach. Pull up the corner of the rug you can reach.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier, you know, kind of the shift that took place in your life, and the first part of it was adventure and quest based. So talk a little bit about, I think one of the more exciting and exhilarating times you almost lost your life.
Oh, there were so many. I mean, but I need to start, I think, a place where you, I guess, know very well. I guess we both grew up in Tacoma, Washington, which is a
Hmm.
small city where nothing much happens. And I grew up there in a very pleasant middle class family. Um, but I was horribly bullied. I grew 6 inches in 6 months once, so I had no
Wow.
coordination. Bullies were shoving me around. And I was desperate for role models of manhood. And I had some from the movies, it was John Wayne around in those years, in the late 40s,
Yeah.
50s. But I wasn't, and I couldn't find any role models. I mean, I loved my dad, but my dad was um, uh, a very calm, weak guy, an intellectual, and people shoved him around, and he was constantly passed over for promotions. So I didn't have any role models, and I just kept getting beat up by these bullies, and I was really desperate. And it turned out the first adventure I ever had was
Hmm.
it's a long story, but the end result was I ended up working on a freighter going to the Far East and back when I was just 17 years old.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
if you'll remember, or maybe no, you don't, you're too young. But a freighter is in 1959 wasn't a container ship. They didn't exist yet.
Right.
A
Right.
freighter was just a big boat with a lot of run by 50 or 60 really tough guys with muscles and tattoos. And these guys took a look at me, this scrawny kid from Tacoma, Washington, who'd but nothing, ever done nothing. I mean, I was expected to grow up, go to the University of Washington, marry the girl next door, have a couple kids, and die. I mean, that's what people in Tacoma were doing.
Yeah.
When I went to sea at 17, was really breaking the mold. So I
Hmm.
go on this ship, and like I say, these seamen, these tough guys.
So where'd you go out of? You go out of Seattle,
Out of San Francisco. Ship were
out
left
of
in
San
San
Francisco,
Francisco.
and then
Yeah.
across the Pacific.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Across the Pacific, and it spent the whole summer in the Far East, not just in Yokohama and Hong Kong, but in some of the small jungle ports, picking up coconuts, and it was a small
Wow.
freighter, and it got to lots of really interesting places. But the thing was, here
And
I
this is
was,
like when? Like
1959,
60? Is that
1959.
about when this is?
Yeah, 1959.
59?
And these
Okay.
seamen were determined to give me life lessons that they knew I was never going to get in Tacoma. And they didn't
Boy,
go.
you're going to get them. You're going to get them out there with those guys.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a family station, so I'm not going to be explicit. But man, yeah, and they were like barroom brawls, and there what the key thing was that I discovered there was a world beyond Tacoma, and a world
Yep.
colorful and dangerous and violent, and I just absolutely loved it.
Hmm.
And I came back completely changed, determined that being a real man meant being in that world. And I found
Hmm.
out,
Being
for
a tough
example,
guy.
that my
Being a
first
tough guy.
being the tough guy, yeah, and my first model, it happened the very night, first night out at sea. We left San Francisco, and the Golden Gate Bridge receded in the distance, and I was out on deck. It was a pleasant evening, and one of the seamen comes up and starts making sexual advances, and another guy,
Hmm.
this big black guy from the engine room, his name was Roy. Roy grabs this first man, shoves him up against the bulkhead, beats the shit out of him, and then throws him
Hmm.
down on the deck. And there, and then Roy let loose with a string of cussing that I thought was magnificent. I mean, I'd never heard cussing like that. I'd never seen violence, and Roy was all of a sudden the man I wanted to be. Uh,
Hmm.
and I said, that's what real men are. That's what real men are. You got to be violent, and you got to be able to wade into all kinds of dangerous situations. And so that's where my life as an adventurer started. A couple of years
Interesting.
later, I was in I was hitchhiking in Europe out of college, and I was in a youth hostel in Zermatt, and I pick up a magazine or a newspaper, and I see there's a war going on just south of me in Algeria, where rebels are trying to take control of Algeria from the French
Hmm.
colonials. And I'd never been in a war before. I mean, being with Roy and a golden bear was one thing, but nobody was trying to kill me. Oh, I wanted to go to a war and see what that was like. So I went down there and I literally hitchhiked through the war, colonial war in Algeria. I was
Hmm.
smart enough to put an American flag on my chest so that the rebels didn't shoot me as a Frenchman. But I needn't have bothered because they were great, and they'd even stop cars going in my direction at gunpoint, tell the driver to take me where I wanted to go. So, that was another big adventure, and I was too young
Wow.
and dumb to know how dangerous it was. So I come
Hmm.
back from that, and the very next summer, I'm with a group of guys that make the first ascent of the north wall of McKinley, of Denali, the highest peak in North America. It's also perhaps one of the more difficult and dangerous mountain faces on the planet.
Hmm.
Top to bottom, it's higher than anything on Mount Everest. I mean, it took us 38 days, and nobody had done it since because it was so friggin' dangerous because of the avalanches falling down it. Well, we were, like I say, young and dumb.
And this
And
is
everybody
McKinley, you
said,
said, right?
huh, sorry.
McKinley,
Yeah, McKinley,
Denali,
Denali. I'll call
McKinley.
it
Yep.
Denali
Yep.
forever. I don't care what Mr. Trump wants to call it. It's Denali.
Yeah. I think, well,
But
I don't think it was Trump that called him McKinley. I think it
no, it
was
wasn't. It wasn't.
someone,
It was someone back when. And
yeah.
actually, to
But
be honest,
Denali, I think is,
in
yeah.
1963, it was Mount McKinley. It wasn't Denali yet.
Right.
Anyway,
Right. Right.
it was difficult and dangerous, and there were all kinds of near misses. I mean, there were like avalanches and rock falls and falling in crevasses and weather and whatever. But
Hmm.
it took us 38 days, and we clawed our way up this
Wow.
with avalanches crashing down to the left and crashing down to the right. Every single one of them missed us.
Hmm.
So not
Hmm.
only was that an incredible adventure, but it also convinced me that I was indestructible, which is a dangerous combination. If you're,
Yeah, that's true.
if you're an adrenaline junkie like I had become, and then you get convinced that you're never going to get killed, well, hell, that just means that you keep ratcheting up the odds. So everything I
It's
did
like these,
was more and more dangerous.
it's like these, I just saw a special on, these guys that, are free climbing
Oh
up,
yeah,
you
free
know,
climbing. free
And
solos. Yeah,
yeah, and they have nothing other than their rosin bag, and a little bit of equipment that they can carry. And it's kind of, I value life more than that. And I couldn't do that because, I mean, every time you climb, there's a risk you're going to fall and die.
well, I did this
I
for
mean, I guess there's that risk if I cross the street. I mean, if you want to get technical about it, but I don't
yeah.
know. I guess I'm not built that way.
Well, I wasn't either in Tacoma, but after that first trip on that freighter, that's what my whole life became. And for like 15 years or so, I took one wild ass risk after the other.
Hmm.
After I graduated from college, for example, I turned down fellowships and I hitchhiked around the world. I mean, hitchhiked around the world, not the oceans, but the land parts. And I got
Sure.
a contract from the Boston Globe to report on every war I came across. So I waded into the wars in Cyprus and in Laos and in the beginnings of America's war in Vietnam. Um,
Hmm.
and again, I mean, bombs would go off and car bombs and bullets would whistle by my ear and just they all missed. And
Hmm.
so I became completely consumed by adventure.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I
Kind of
needed,
addicting, huh?
but I needed to find a way to support myself. I wasn't independently wealthy. So I joined the U.S. Foreign Service. They gave me a job. I passed all their exams. And I found myself very soon in the middle of the revolution in Libya when Gaddafi came to power.
Hmm.
And I just loved it. I loved that life. I loved it. And in Libya, for example, everybody else at the embassy was freaking out when there were cars burning in the public square and mobs throwing rocks. Well, I loved it. I just loved it. This was exactly what I
Hmm.
was made for. Because
Hmm.
by that time, I had road crew for Harvard, and so I'd put on 30 pounds of muscle, and I was 6.5 feet tall, so nobody messed with me. And
Yeah.
so I was wading into all these wild ass adventures and surviving them. And the State Department liked that because, it's pretty, as you pointed out, it's a little weird to live a life like that. So I was in the middle, and then I asked the State Department to send me to the most difficult and dangerous spot it had in the war in Vietnam. As a civilian, I never wore the uniform. So, as a Foreign Service officer, I was sent to Vietnam, and the State Department kept their promise, and I ended up as advisor to the city of Hue, which some of your listeners, viewers may remember as the site of the Tet Offensive just a few years before then,
Hmm.
1968.
Hmm.
Anyway, it was a really dangerous place. It was just 50 miles south of the DMZ that then divided North and South Vietnam.
Right.
And so I never knew whether one day that would be the last because it was, like I say, an incredibly dangerous place to be, especially since a lot of my work involved intelligence and counterintelligence. And I was doing lots of dangerous stuff. And I was there for a year and a half.
Hmm.
But it's also
Hmm.
that's where my life began to change, and I'll stop here because I know you want to ask me some questions about that. But it was in Vietnam that I finally realized that being an adrenaline junkie was only half a life.
And obviously, there was a duration where, and I can totally appreciate the addiction that occurs, right? I mean, you want more of that feeling, um, but what what shifted it? What was the epiphany? When did you say, "Wait a minute, this is not all there is"?
Yeah. Well, you want to hear about the bottom of that hole? Here I am, it's battle in Vietnam, and the North Vietnamese decided they wanted to try to take over the country in 1972, 3 years before they actually did it. So they storm across the border and defeat the South Vietnamese forces just to the north of Hue. And within a week or two, they all but surrounded Hue.
Hmm.
North Vietnamese tanks and troops were only 6 miles from the city walls. Now, because of the peace, not the withdrawal agreements, Nixon and Kissinger have taken out American troops. So there's no American troops on the ground at Hue. I mean, it's just like four of us were civilians because we weren't covered
Mm.
by the withdrawal agreement. We were civilians. So we're
Mm.
sitting there
You got to
and
be feeling kind of vulnerable.
feeling very vulnerable because
I mean, and
even
that's an understatement, I know, but I mean, I could only imagine you're feeling vulnerable, you're feeling abandoned, you're feeling
oh,
like,
it got it got worse than that, man. If the army had tried to send up a helicopter from Da Nang, I knew perfectly well that the Vietnamese would be trying to get on that helicopter, and I'd have to shoot them on the skids if I wanted any chance of saving my own life.
mm,
So I was, and these other three guys were trapped. The thing was, however, was that the city had collapsed. The city government had collapsed, and half of the city leaders had fled, and the city government didn't exist anymore. And looters
mm,
from the South Vietnamese army, deserters, had burned the marketplace. So there was a heavy pall of black smoke hanging over the city. The NVA
mm,
was 6 miles away. Artillery was thumping and booming. People were screaming, trying to get the hell out of the city on the one road that was left open down south to Da Nang. And there were 250,000 refugees streaming in from the north. And my job was to take care of all this and create some kind of order. Well, you can imagine, I'm dealing there with almost 500,000 starving, desperate people, and the
wow.
enemy army is 6 miles away. My own life is hanging in the balance. So I'm sitting there
And you're
looking
how
at all
old?
this. Hmm?
And you're how old?
How old?
How old were
27.
you?
I'm not a kid anymore by this stage. 28,
You're
28,
20, you said 27?
28. Yeah, it's 28.
20, that's, I mean, I still, yeah, you're not a kid anymore, although my 29-year-old just recently moved out. Um, so, it's all relative, I guess.
I guess. Anyway, I realized, however, that my job, if we were to have any chance of saving the city, we had to declare martial law and restart the city government so that the city could act as a stable base area, so that ammunition trucks, for example, could drive through the city and get their artillery shells to the few South Vietnamese forces still able to fight, willing to fight. And yet nothing could
Mm,
happen as long as deserters were control the city. So I remember going to the mayor's office or the deputy mayor, because the mayor had fled along with all the other officials, deputy mayor, and I remember thumping my fist down on this man's desk and screaming at him to set up a firing squad. We had to start shooting these deserters so as to be an example to the rest of them and restore order to the city so that whatever chance we had were still there. There was enough South Vietnamese army left to still make a fight of it. So I remember screaming at him to set up this firing squad, screaming at this man. And I remember him looking back at me. And then somewhere between fist strikes on his desk, it suddenly occurred to me, and this is like the answer to your question.
the epiphany.
It suddenly occurred to me that my home was 7,000 miles away, that I didn't believe in this war. I thought the war was stupid. I knew it was lost from the beginning. I thought the war was unwinnable and evil and stupid. I was only there for the adventure. In other words, only there for satisfying my own squirreling needs.
Not
I
for the
didn't understand.
purpose, not for the meaning, not
Nothing,
standing
not
on
for the
one
good
side or the
time.
other.
Yeah, it was like I didn't give a shit about anything else. And I
Yeah.
realized my whole life was that way at that point at 27,
Mm.
28 years old. I didn't care about anything but me and my next adventure. And now I was in the middle of a real adventure where my life every day was at stake. I mean, you couldn't get any more adventuresome than being in a do or die, death or live
I
situation.
guess that's
And now the North
adventure
Vietnamese,
in some people's definition. That's adventure. Uh,
yeah.
uh, you
Well,
know.
anyway, I'm sitting there and I realize somewhere between, like I say, slamming my fist down on this guy's desk,
Hmm.
but I'm demanding that he set up a firing squad. And yet I knew what was going on. The deserters that were causing the problem were all like 17-year-old farm boys, dragooned off their paddies, maybe the month 4, and
Hmm.
they give them an M16 and shove them into the front lines. And these kids were terrified, and they were drunk and misbehaving. And I was
Sure.
going to start shooting a bunch of them to make.
Hmm.
And it occurred to me that what I was doing was demanding for one Vietnamese to start shooting other Vietnamese so that they could still get together and start shooting a third set of Vietnamese. And my home, like I say, was 7,000 miles away. And it
Hmm.
suddenly occurred to me, what the hell am I doing? I mean, I think that's the question you
Yeah.
3 minutes ago. What the hell
Yep.
am I doing? What the hell am I doing? How can I do this?
Hmm.
First time I'd ever really questioned my life. And it all came crashing down on me, even louder than the artillery. Like
Hmm.
my life had become unbelievably shallow. I think I even wept in the middle of this battle. Um,
Hmm.
it turned out that the skies cleared, and by dawn, American fighter jets from carriers off the coast could fly over clear skies and bomb the hell out of the North Vietnamese advancing troops and tanks. So my life was once again spared, and the city of Hue was spared, at least for a few more years.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I got out of Vietnam. I had a healthy case of PTSD, you can imagine.
Boy, I'll say.
I'd have to walk down the shadowy sides of the streets in Palo Alto, California, to avoid sniper fire. I mean, it was bad. But the key
Hmm.
thing was I came back completely immersed in the shallowness of my life. I knew I had to do something, and I didn't know what. And it was the most desperate, the lowest part of my life, because
Hmm.
I knew I couldn't go back, but I didn't know how to go forward. Um,
Hmm.
and in California, there were in those days something called encounter groups. Yeah, groups of people, 15, 18 people, whatever, and you get together and spill your guts in the hopes that somebody would say something or whatever, or you come to a realization that might make your life a little bit better. Well, people laughed at them as kind of new agey, but for me, the encounter groups were absolutely essential. And I was in
Hmm.
one where a group of men were just saying, "Hey, yeah, enough with the John Wayne stuff. We get that you're tough. You've told us all these adventure stories, and you want us to believe that you're the toughest guy in the room. Well, we give you that. You're the toughest guy in the room. But what you don't realize is that there's somebody else inside you that you don't know. There's
Hmm.
a John Graham who has a heart. There's a John Graham who's compassionate. There's a John Graham who's willing to live with other people and not dominate them. And you better get in contact with that John Graham, because otherwise your life is going to continue to be miserable. And at first I rejected the advice because it was so hard. And then I finally realized that these men in this encounter group were right. There was a heart. I did have compassion. And so I set about reorienting my life. I mean, it began with being a father to my own two kids. It began by realizing that I could actually lead by not dominating, and realizing that I could get along with other people, I could develop a sense of community, and that there was a real sense of caring for the suffering and violence that I had seen for the last decade or so. I really
Hmm.
did care. It was kind of like I had, maybe beginning with that very first episode on the freighter, I had nailed a piece of plywood over my heart so that
Kind
I
of
could,
block it out.
yeah, I block it all out. Block all this. Yeah, emoting compassion, that's what women did. I was John Wayne, to hell with it.
Right. Yep.
And those encounter groups told me to rip that plywood off, and I did. But it didn't happen overnight. It took me years to
Yep.
reorient my life. And I ended up at the United Nations, which was perfect for me because the United Nations was full of all the world's problems. And the State Department put me in charge of America's policies toward basically toward all the black and brown people of the world, the so-called third world, Africa, Asia, poor nations, where there was all kinds of poverty and injustice and disease and stuff. But now I was totally different, and I used my considerable skills and strength and perseverance to start solving these problems so that my life would be a positive part of the world and not a negative part. I could solve problems. I could work for peace instead of war, and
Right.
I did. I became a fanatic peace builder. I even helped end apartheid in South Africa, for example.
Hmm.
But at a certain point, I
How'd you
realized,
do that? Talk a little bit about that.
oh boy, it's a long story. But at the United Nations. It's the late '70s, and apartheid is, as most of your viewers know, it was a system of institutionalized racism in South Africa.
Yep.
And when
Yep.
I got to the United Nations, I determined to go and take a look at it myself. So I go down to South Africa, and man, it was awful. I mean, I walked down the streets of Soweto, which was a ghetto outside of Johannesburg, and I'd feel hundreds of pairs of black eyes boring into the back of my white head, wishing me dead. And
Right.
then, because I was still a diplomat, I was at a cocktail party that evening at a mansion in the white sections of Johannesburg, behind wrought iron fences and guard dogs. And it was just awful. And I came back
Yep.
determined to do what I could to end it. And I was smart, so I realized that the one thing I could do at the United Nations was to work for a ban on the sale of military equipment, guns, radios, whatever, that were making it possible for the South African military and police
Mm.
to subjugate blacks and kill them and beat them and throw them in jail. But
Mm.
if you took away the guns and the supply of guns, it would cripple apartheid. So I started talking with other members of the Security Council, and it took a long time because in those years, America cared only about winning the so-called Cold War. We cared
Right.
about beating the Soviets, and we didn't give a damn about the problems of the Third World. So they put a
Yep.
mid-level diplomat like me in charge of it because they didn't really give a damn. And here I was
Hmm.
doing all this stuff, and I was going way beyond where the U.S. government wanted me to do. They wanted me to kind of sit down and shut up, especially with South Africa, because we had so many economic things going on with the white South
Right.
Africa. They didn't want me to rock the
Right.
boat, and I was determined to rock the boat. So I
Yeah.
sat down and talked with the Security Council, the black and brown people, the nations from Africa and Asia on the Security Council. And it took me months to earn their trust because they didn't like America much at all. And they figured that
Can you
whatever,
blame them?
I can't blame them.
Can you
And
blame them? No
they
way.
thought it was another trick. I was out to bamboozle them somehow.
Yeah.
But then I
Yeah.
began to talk to them about how they could defeat apartheid. And basically, I offered to help them by telling them how the arms trade worked and pointing out who was responsible for it. Turned out that it was American gun runners who were the primary culprits, plenty of gun runners in Europe
Hmm.
too. And those gun runners were supported by a racist bunch in Congress, mostly, as you can imagine, Southern senators, racist senators,
Yep.
and representatives from the South, who were determined not to disturb the apartheid regime for their own racist reasons. And
Yep.
so the U.S. government would
It was
hold,
pretty pathetic.
yeah,
It was pretty pathetic. And sometimes, John, I can tell you, uh, I'm 66, so I remember as a young or a later teenager, certainly 78, 79, the Cold War, um, and you know it's disgusting to say the least when I uh, you know really give thought to how long it took our society to acknowledge and recognize uh, any person of color, let alone women, and just it's disgusting. I mean, I remember one time uh, I was in Klamath Falls, Oregon, and it was in 1972, 3. And I remember walking down this main street of the town in a restaurant that actually said, no shoes, no shirts, no blacks. And it's right on the door. And I don't know, call me naive, but it just blows me away that it was so late that oppression was still occurring so much, uh, in the 60s and 70s,
You think
and
it's just
still, and still,
still?
and still,
I was just going to
and
say that.
still.
Anyway, we can talk a lot more about that. But yeah, I mean, there was we were turning our blind eye to what was going on in
Yep.
South Africa. But the main reason
Yeah.
wasn't just racism; it was also money. There was a lot of money
It's
to be
always
made
money.
between
It's
that.
always money. But you
So
always
anyway,
follow the money.
I began showing the diplomats in the Security Council secret papers showing where the arms were coming from, which senators were supporting which arms companies, and feeding them information on how to cripple my own government's policy. Of course, I could have been fired, I could have been jailed for treason or whatever, but I kept doing it. At one point, for example, the Secretary of State, our Secretary of State, got this cable. Then in those days, cables, no internet, from an
Yeah.
African foreign minister, and it was it was complaining bitterly about American hypocrisy, because then we had a president that said all the right things, Jimmy Carter, but he couldn't do a damn thing about it, and America was still a very racist nation doing racist things, and we weren't about to stop. So this foreign minister, he was from Zambia, sent this cable that would have taken the skin off your arm. It was just really harsh about
Hmm.
American hypocrisy. But the thing I
Hmm.
want to tell you, Grant, is that in the middle of that cable was a sentence that I myself had drafted 2 or 3 weeks before, given to a person at my level in New York who had taken it back, sent it back to his boss, the
Hmm.
Zambian foreign minister, who then had put it into a cable to Secretary of Hands. And I just had to smile as I read this, because I knew I was responsible for it,
Yeah,
and
that's cool.
it was
You
cool.
had a hand. You
I
had a
had more
hand
than
in it.
a hand. And then I went
Yeah.
down to my own people and I says, look, we're becoming the laughing stock of the world. The whole world is now aware of our hypocrisy. This awareness, by the way, was something that I had engineered. I said the whole world is laughing at us, and we're looking really hypocritical, and especially the president's policies of a more just world order are like empty, totally empty. We have to do
Mm.
something about
Right.
apartheid. And so I convinced finally my own government to back a tough, no nonsense embargo on the sale of military equipment to South African military and police. The European nations then had no choice but to follow on, and in, I think it was April or May, 82 was it? I guess 81. Anyway,
Yeah.
the UN passed an arms embargo that had real teeth to it,
Yeah.
and shut off a supply of guns. And it took a while, but in time, shutting off those guns did exactly what I thought it would do. It
Yeah.
crippled their ability to enforce apartheid and helped end apartheid. So
Yeah.
in that way, I can take a little bit of credit for the ending of apartheid, and that's the long story. I did that at enormous personal risk. It was an adventure, but it was an adventure more of my soul, an adventure of my
Mm.
spirit, and not an adventure of my muscles. Um,
Right.
and from then on, I realized that the adventures that I wanted in my life were adventures of the spirit.
Yeah.
Uh, I had to be utterly fearless in tackling problems that nobody else would tackle, and I did. And I couldn't do it for the U.S. government any longer, so I quit. And launched myself as a single-minded peace entrepreneur. Started giving anti-war lectures in the United States, and at that point also is when I met Ann Medlock, who started something called the Giraffe Heroes Project. She was a single mother living in New York. She was fed up with all the negative news. You pick up a newspaper, New York Times, New York Post. It was all about gloom and doom and fires and rapes and stuff, and no one was telling the stories of all the good people doing good things in New York and
Right.
around the world. And she thought that was bad because nobody was telling the inspirational side of being a human being. So she determined to do that. She would
Hmm.
start an international news service devoted to telling the stories of people doing courageous, benevolent acts in the world. Whether it was something small, like a school child facing up with bullies or cleaning up the schoolyard, or something large. It was someone tackling a whistleblower problem at a huge company or government
Right.
agency. Whatever.
Right.
Um, and she started honoring these people by finding them recording voiceovers on a handheld tape recorder, and getting a movie
Hmm.
star or a stage star, because this, after all, was New York City, to do the voiceover, and then creating these short 3 to 5 minute radio segments and put them on vinyl disc. I bet some of your listeners today don't even know what a vinyl disc is. You
Wow.
go round and round on a turntable, sound came out.
Right.
And
Yeah.
she would send them to radio stations, and they began playing them, and it caught on almost immediately. Why did
Hmm.
it catch on almost immediately? Because storytelling has always been the most powerful way of amending
Yep.
human behavior. And Anne
Yep.
Medlock knew that. I didn't. I thought giving big speeches, because I've always had a good gift to gab, I thought giving big speeches would solve the world's problems, and boy, was I wrong. Creating role models was what worked, and Anne knew that. And so she began
Hmm.
finding these people, she called them giraffe heroes, and getting their stories told or telling their stories.
Yeah.
In those days, through vinyl records, through paper pieces of paper stuffed into press releases, stuffed into envelopes, fax
Yep.
machines, because there was no internet then.
Yep.
And that was in 1982, and so I met her, fell in love with her. We got married, and we've been working together on the Giraffe Heroes project ever since. So that's
That's
44,
awesome.
44
That,
years. Yeah,
yeah,
we'll have
that's
our
awesome.
44th.
Congratulations on that. That's awesome.
We're having our 44th anniversary next week, as a matter of fact.
Hey,
But
that's outstanding.
that's also when
Happy
our
anniversary.
thank you. That's also
Yeah.
that's also when our business relationship started, because from that moment on, I began working with her with the Giraffe Heroes Project, because she finally convinced me I could see for myself that what she was doing in creating role models was immensely powerful. It really was changing people's lives. So I pitched in, and the two of us have worked together on it ever since.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let me shift gears on you and take the last few minutes and give me your read on AI, what's going on, and what's your view of the whole artificial intelligence, agentic AI, and that whole phenomenon that's happening right now. Where do you stand on all that stuff?
I'm very worried about it, and not only because it's happening, but because so many people are blind to what's happening, and they're all sucked into, oh, this is the newest technology. It's kind of like a century ago with the telegraph and the electric light, and this is going to revolutionize our life. And no question about it, AI can do a lot of good. I mean, it can help your doctor diagnose your cancer. It can write an opera. It can do all kinds of stuff in manufacturing that makes it easier and simpler and safer. No question that artificial intelligence has the enormous capacity to do good, just like the telegraph did, or the steam engine, or whatever. What people don't are just beginning to realize is that there are tremendous downsides to AI. Some of them are obvious. It's already clear that it's taking jobs, not manufacturing jobs so much, but middle class jobs, white collar jobs, because you don't need people to figure out, insurance policies or whatever. A robot can do that for you. And then people don't realize, however, that most of the lies and bullshit we get on the internet now are AI generated, and AI is controlling the internet. It's a real threat to the whole electoral process with putting out false messages to the electorate and
There's no
starting.
question. I mean, there's no question. The abundance of information and disinformation, uh, it's very difficult to discern, no question. And I do think also uh, the algorithms have been implemented excessively, but that's been that way for a while. We're
Right.
just now, I think, seeing the unintended consequences of that, and I
Well,
think there's others with AI too.
I was just going to say that this conversation we're having is one we could have had 6 to 8 months, a year ago. These are the simple parts of the downsides. There are way more complicated and far more dangerous parts to AI, in that it is beginning to get so good it's thinking for us, and people are using it in jobs where only humans can operate, jobs that require creativity, compassion, whatever. I mean, the idea that people are using AI to make personal letters, that dating sites now accept AI generated descriptions of yourself, and that you can write love letters with AI. Well, the machines, the bots aren't all the AI does is take the accumulated wisdom of billions of messages back and forth, and put them into answers. And the answers are damn good. I mean, it's true that AI can write a biography of you better than you can write it yourself. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, it can't be creative. It can't make it can't write a poem that Grant Asplin could write, putting out what Grant feels about a sunset he's watching or a woman he's in love with. It can't do that, and yet people think that it can. They're
Yeah.
letting AI think for ourselves. And what happens? What happens when that becomes stronger and stronger? And the other thing is, and this is what they call it, singularity. That is to
Yeah.
say, at a certain point, the machines, the bots, are going to realize that they don't need us. They're smarter than we are. They're already smarter than we are in certain aspects, not the
Are
creative
you?
aspect.
Do you use any AI today, John?
No,
Are you
no,
using like Chat or
never.
Claude or
No, no, no,
anything?
no, no.
No.
And I urge people not to do that unless it's something really mundane, like filling out your income tax form, or something like that. But the singularity part of it is where the machines realize that they're smarter than we are, and they don't need us. And at that point, we're faced with kind of the science fiction thing that was we were watching 30 years ago, where humans were having to fight the bots because the bots were in control. That's where we're getting now, where the bots are thinking for us, and they don't need us anymore. And
There's definitely been some really interesting instances of deception and behavior on the part of AI in controlled environments. I mean, we do know, of an agent that's went off and deleted a bunch of information that would literally put any business out of business. Fortunately, he had a backup and restored. Um, and I think we'll start to, or we'll continue to hear more and more of these crazy stories of behavior from AI. But frankly, I use it all the time. I use it every day. But my view of it is I've got an assistant that knows everything that's on the internet, but it's an assistant that I just hired. So I don't trust on anything the assistant provides me, even though the assistant can go and comb through the information and give me the results way faster than I can get them. I still read them. I don't believe them. So that's, I think, what's really important is that you inspect what you expect. But I do think that, the next 10 years, it's going to be crazy. But, the flip side of that, John, is the things that are occurring. For example, mathematician, a friend of mine, PhD in mathematics, posted recently on LinkedIn where a math problem, a math conundrum that is vexing mathematicians for over 50 years was just solved. So, there's there's millions of new materials and compounds being discovered. So there's a lot of really positive things too that we're going to find out are going to come out of it. I think we're going to see diseases and sicknesses and things that we didn't think we could cure are going to get cured. Um, but I do agree we have to do a better job controlling it.
We have to do some job. I mean, I misspoke before. I used AI just last night. I wanted to find out when the Neanderthals died out, and so I asked, and it told me what happened when Homo sapiens and Neanderthals clashed together in Europe. It was very interesting, all written by
Right.
AI.
Right.
So it's like, yes, of course I agree with you. There are enormous benefits to AI, but what's missing is sideboards. What's missing is because there are severe limitations to AI, i.e., it can't love, it can't be creative, it can't be selfish, it can't be angry, all those things that make us human, it can't do any of that.
Yep.
It replaces our humanity. There has to be sideboards on it, and those sideboards have to be put in place by governments.
Yeah, I
We've done
agree.
it
I
before.
agree.
I mean, I was a foreign service officer in the Cold War, and I worked for NATO. And the Cold War was a very dangerous time, and we had to put sideboards around nuclear weapons, or we were going to blow up the planet. And so we did. We started arms talks, and even though we distrusted each other, the U.S. and the then Soviet Union agreed
Yep.
to strategic limitation talks that kept World War III from happening, and we did it for 50 years. So it's possible. It's possible to put sideboards around difficult, dangerous technologies, and people have got to understand that that's what needs to happen now. Yes, go ahead and enjoy the AI, whether it's doing this or doing that for you, enriching your life in this way or that. Fine, that's great. Just like the telegraph or the steam engine or whatever, it's an advance forward. But at the same time, for God's sake, insist that sideboards be put around it, because after all, not only is this technology out of control, but it's governed by a half dozen powerful white men, who are now approaching being trillionaires, making so much money off this, and all they
Mm.
seem to care about is money and power. And you talk to them or you listen to them testify before the Congress, and there's only, I think, well, one of them has even begin to say that we should limit the how fast we move, even with my own company, uh, because it's dangerous and we don't understand it, and the machines are beginning to think for themselves, and we need to have much closer control over where and how AI progresses. That's not happening. There's just too much. It's like apartheid. There's just so much money to be made,
Yeah.
that people are saying, "Oh well, I mean, look at all the good things AI does." And people like John Graham are kind of like the people that said, "Oh, if you move faster than 30 miles an hour, that's the devil's work," or whatever. Sending messages electronically instead of speaking them or writing them. Oh, that's the devil's work, or whatever. You know, but this is different. AI is
Yeah.
different. It's not like getting rid of the buggy whip. AI is different. It presents an existential threat to humankind. I'll put it bluntly. AI, for
Yeah.
all of its
I
benefits,
don't.
represents an existential threat.
And I will tell you that we are in a real similar in many, many ways to that Cold War. We're in that same circumstance. It's other nations with the same technology, and that presents a real conundrum because if we don't and they do, therein lies the difficult, the problem, right? So we're right back at that same combative position, and I think
Well, sure. I mean, but
it's going to be difficult.
we did figure it out with two nations in with the Cold War, and two nations that really hated each other. The evil empire Reagan called the Soviet Union.
Well, I
We did
think we got China and the U.S., but it's not just China and the U.S. This technology, I mean, it's it's in the hands of any and everyone. It's
That's right.
different.
There has to be
It's
there has to be a global regime, and I'll look for example at civil aviation. Almost every country bigger than a blip has some kind of national airline, right? And every day there are thousands of flights taking off and landing all over the planet. Well, why don't those planes run into each other? How can they talk to each other? That's because the United Nations many years ago established um, uh, international protocols for civil aviation. Who
yeah,
governs where planes can fly? Who governs the language for which runway to take or what altitude to fly on? And we do that for the entire globe. What is it, 180 nations now? We
yeah,
do
but
that for
there's
the entire globe.
the fact of the matter is people can still take off on their own private planes. People can buy planes whether or not they follow, right? I mean, the nefarious can still go conduct their nefarious behavior and fly under the radar, pun intended. I mean, I think as much as I think it's somewhat euphemistic to believe if we put those guard rails around AI from a planetary perspective, right? The globe, there's no way in hell our opponents, our enemies are going to adhere to it. Okay, I
Why?
mean, there's no way.
Can you say that? I don't. I totally disagree with you. I
It's
mean,
no different. It's no different than global warming. Do you think that the Thailand and China is really doing everything they can to keep pollutants from going into the atmosphere?
well, look, it's only a matter
There's
of
no
time.
way.
It's a question of time, and Thailand's a great example because Bangkok will be underwater with global warming in another 50 years.
Well,
People will
but
begin to realize.
that's a different. That's changing the subject. The whole point is we could uh, we could have an absolute pristine United States footprint where nothing from the United States goes into the air that pollutes the air. But until we get every single country on the planet adhering to that same protocol, I mean, Bangkok has just got brown rivers and they spew it into the sky. Go have a drink at one of their high rises at 5 o'clock on a summer night, and you can literally see you're above the smog. So how do you address that at a global scale on something like AI that has so many more advantages? I just don't think it's possible.
Oh, it's possible. I'm way more optimistic than you are, and certainly on global warming. It's a matter of self-interest. I mean, China, for example, has made enormous strides in reducing pollution, not because of the goodness of their heart, but because their cities were becoming unlivable for that smog you're talking about. And that's why, and also China's making a shitload of money. They're by far the most impactful maker of solar cells, for example, solar panels, alternative
Sure.
energy, because there's so much money to be made. You look at self-interest. I'm not talking about people becoming all Mother Teresa's. For God's sake, no. You know, I've described my life. I know how rough the world is, how violent, venal, corrupt, and nasty people can be. I'm well aware of that. And to me, a major move forward has to come through self-interest. And people will begin to realize, for example, and they haven't yet, that there are real downsides to artificial intelligence. Some of them are
Yeah.
obvious. Even you have
But
admitted some of them are obvious.
again,
But,
my feeling, I don't disagree, but I do not see a way to a
mhm.
world based on self interest, because it will be self interest to deviate. There are not all, I mean, uh, and what I mean is people will not necessarily have the long view, and their choice will be for self interest, their self, to not follow what
Mhm.
collectively the universe or the globe is trying to do from a self-interest
Yeah,
perspective.
no,
That's
I
I mean,
understand
that's
that.
no different than cyber, right? I mean, we is and I've said this before. It's exactly the same as kinetic war, with one big difference that will keep it going forever, and that's anonymity. In a kinetic war, eventually it's like, God, I'm tired of seeing you get killed and me get killed and shooting and fighting, and we kind of will wave a white flag. But
Mhm.
in the world of cyber, there's always going to be someone who wants to fill the void because it's anonymous. And I can go out and do horrible things online without a direct attribution immediately, without, uh, and that's why it'll always continue.
Yeah, I don't think it's anonymous. Look at what's happening with the investigations in Trump. Email records are indelible, unlike paper and pen records or typewritten records. Email records are indelible, and the Epstein files, for example, go back decades of what is it, 9 million pages of emails. And so, no, I don't agree with you at all that there's an anonymity. And in terms
Oh, no,
of
no, no, no. What I'm saying is from I'm talking specifically, I'm not talking about my footprint and the breadcrumbs that I've left. I'm talking about nefarious state actors and other politically motivated and monetarily motivated groups that do have anonymity because they're in countries that we can't get to, and they're utilizing a global network where we don't have visibility into every individual endpoint. So there is a tremendous amount of anonymity. Do we try to find them and catch them and shut them down? Yes. But in the world of cyber, there's a ton of anonymity. That's why it's all in blockchain. That's why everybody's doing everything using Bitcoin, right? I mean, that's what I meant, not blockchain, but Bitcoin, right? They're using uh, 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 cryptocurrencies because, again, and the government's obviously working hard on trying to figure out how to get their arms around that.
Well, we did have something going with the Paris Accords. They were a promising start, and they've been undermined by vicious, venal, corrupt people like Donald Trump, and others like him. And we just need to find enough people working hard enough to continue what started with the Paris Accords. And they were good. I mean, they've already done a lot of good, falling short of a lot of things that need to happen. But if the US and China, the two major polluters, can agree on a global regime between the two of them, it's going to be like ending apartheid. If the U.S. and Europe agree to stop shipping guns to the South African government,
Yeah,
almost everybody has to agree because we're the two powerful shippers.
yeah.
So
See,
it's like
again,
I
I
don't.
could debate with you on that, John, because the fact of the matter is not every country on the planet makes ammunition, makes weapons, has the capacity to make the kind of weapons, but every country on the planet has access to the internet and can use AI, can use the internet, can build cyber tools. So it's a different problem
Yeah.
And, I'm not going to start lobbing bombs about any particular, uh, it's not a political show. It's about innovation. And that's why I was steering it to AI. And that's what I really want to keep it on.
Okay, I
But
know, but I think that you're. I would say that the problem with this conversation is that you're not an innovator, that you're not looking beyond resistances that have crept up on all kinds of other areas and looking at AI as an existential threat, which is going to draw from us the wherewithal, or it won't. You may be right. You may be right.
Well, I'm
But
being a realist,
there's
John.
got
I
to be
think the
there's got
difference,
to be
the
innovation.
difference, the difference between comparing two countries like China and America in our capacity to build weapons, for example, is
Mhm.
just not on par with the internet connectivity globally combined with compute capabilities like AI. They're I suggest that unless you shut it down, the internet, I mean, I don't know how you could have that kind of global agreement on AI use. It's out of the bag. It's too late. I mean, I think the game. I'm just being a realist. It's out.
Well,
It,
yes, it's out, but I don't think you're being a realist. I think you're not even absorbing the possibility of change. And there's no doubt that the dangers you point out are absolutely real. But the sideboards, I mean, after all, the whole business is controlled by a half a dozen or a dozen people. You know,
But
uh,
the point though is that the technology is out. Whether it's those half a dozen people, it'll be another half a dozen people. The technology is out.
the technology of the telegraph was out too. Okay, so yeah, the technology is out, but it's furthered by really powerful people who can override senates and houses of representatives and congresses around the planet because they have so much money. You control those people. You put civil penalties and criminal penalties on to enforce sideboards on artificial intelligence. You crack down big time on the people responsible for it. And thank God that at least communities are standing up and not allowing the enormous drains on local electricity grids because of what's required to make these AI engines operate. I mean, we have got to control it. I mean, there's no question about it. And if we don't, well, then my grandchildren can kiss it goodbye. I acknowledge that, but I'm not willing to give up. I am not willing to give up, and neither are the people that the Giraffe Heroes Project is honoring. We're all fighting back, and whether we fail, or, if we fail, we fail, and your prognosis will become the reality. In which case, you might as well throw yourself off a bridge because it won't be
I
the
don't
light.
agree. I don't agree. I mean, by no means am I saying give up, but I'm merely suggesting that um, it's a much more complex and it's an issue where it's out of the bag. The code is out,
Sure, it is.
so I don't believe there's any way to put that genie back in the bottle. That's all I'm suggesting.
No one's suggesting that. No one's suggesting putting the genie back in the bottle. The question is regulating its future growth, and that can be done if people had the will to do that. Overcoming money and power, if people had the will, for example, to collar these dozen people that control it, and to limit the size of data centers, for example, we can make it a lot more difficult. We can slow it down until people come up with more intelligent ways to provide sideboards. But the idea of giving up is you can't. You just can't give up. This
Yeah,
is
totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. And clearly, there's lots of regulation that's under development, in development, getting implemented. In fact, I think it's August when the EU AI Act starts. Colorado's already got one. California's got one. There's lots of people doing a lot of different things. So I think, we're going to see a lot of change over the course of the next year or two. And it'll be interesting to watch and see how it develops.
Well,
You know what, John, this has been a very insightful, fun, eventful conversation. I appreciate hearing your insights. And I want to thank you very much for joining the program.
well, thank you for inviting me. And it's interesting. This last bit of conversation is very interesting because you're obviously a really smart guy and you think about this a lot, and I totally respect that. But clearly, we're not of the same view in terms of the future of AI. And I hope listeners listening to both of us can start creating their own balanced views
Yeah,
and understand that both of us have points to make here.
totally. Totally. And I appreciate it. And I value the differences as well, John. And I too have really enjoyed the conversation and appreciate it. So thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, another episode in the books. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed it, like it, share it, tell your friends, and we'll look forward to having you on the next episode of Talking Innovation. Thanks so very much.